In our first episode, we will look at what is delivered with the Gadena's Minimo and whether it's complete. Small, fine, quiet, and easy to use via your smartphone using the app. Are you ready for the new Gadena's Minimo? Just because it's interesting, and besides, you also have to check and see whether everything is in there. The mower has to be in the box, naturally, including the user manual and quick start guide, as well as a form for product registration. When you do that, you get all sorts of additional services. Then there's a power adapter. And, very important, the ruler too. Then there are the screws for attaching the floor plate, cable connectors, and cable clamps to connect the cable to the charging station. There is also the low voltage cable. And there's the charging unit. The cable attachments are on the back with lots of hooks. The cable roll for the boundary and guide wires. But we'll explain later what that means. And don't forget, all the way at the bottom there is still the floor plate. And now for the mower itself. On the top of the mower, you'll find the super simple buttons for operating it. And here is the big stop button, the turnable back wheel, and the heart of it all, the free-swinging precision blades. In our second video, we will find the perfect spot for the charging station of our Minimo and set it up. For the installation, you will need a hammer, pliers, and wire cutters. So, in order to find the best place for the charging station, be sure to get the layout of your garden. The area should be shady and level, so that the mower can drive itself into the station well. Preferably, the station should be outside of the lawn and have 2 meters in front of it so that the Minimo can drive to work and back home again easily. And there should be no magnetic objects near the charging station. You can use any flat developed surface, such as terraces, beds, etc., to set up a comfy home for your Minimo. Depending on the type of garden, it also makes a lot of sense if the charging station is not in the middle, but rather at the end of the area to be mowed. Of course, nothing works without electricity. A 3-meter long cable is included in the box. Longer cables are available as accessories from Gardena. First, position the floor plate so that the back of it is facing the edge of the lawn. The small holes are to allow water to drain. Then I just have to clip the changing unit in from above. So, now connect the adapter to the low voltage cable and the charging station. Finally, plug in the adapter. Push the mowing robot into the charging station and turn on the main switch. Important: don't screw in the mounting screws for the floor plate. We'll take care of that at the end. In our third episode, we'll start with setting up the boundary wire correctly so that our Minimo knows where its work area is. The mower shouldn't fall into a pond or run off or something, and should always find its way back to its station. And it does that with the help of 2 different systems: the boundary wire and the guide wire. In this episode, let's start with the boundary wire. The boundary wire serves to delineate the mowing area. As soon as the mower comes near the wire, it gets a signal from it, turns around and continues in a different direction. But before we can really get started with laying it, this is very important. The guide and boundary wires have to be connected at some place at the other end of the garden, as far from the charging station as possible. It is important to define this spot in advance because we have to plan a 10cm loop there in the boundary wire. For me, it would be this spot. Okay, now let's get the boundary wire. We start by the charging station. When the charging station is outside of the lawn, for example in a bed or on a terrace, care must be taken to maintain a gap of 30cm to the right and left of the charging station, measured from the centre of the charging station. In this case, we also have more space and can lay the boundary wire on the right side directly along the mulched bed. Now comes the gap along the edge of the lawn. Near solid walls, leave 35cm so that the mower doesn't hit anything when turning. For For beds and gravel paths, 30 centimetres is enough. It shouldn't be any less, because otherwise the mower could get stuck. With the ruler, it is really easy to maintain the right gap. It's also important that the bed or gravel path is level or only slightly lower than the surface to be mowed, so that the precision blades don't get damaged. For paths or pavers and so forth, 10 centimetres are sufficient. In that case, the mower runs over the path and cuts the grass right up to the edge of the lawn. The lawn or mowing edge defines the end of the lawn. For a stylish lawn edge, our motorised friend needs at least 16 centimetres in front of a solid obstacle in order to create an elegant finish. For example, here. If there is no solid obstacle, the lawn edging stones can be narrower. If there is a path or pavers in the lawn, the robot can simply drive over them. There should be a gap of 25 centimetres around a pond, and it should also be secured with a 15 centimetre barrier. Pound in the mounting hooks every 100 centimetres, then pull the wire flat. Also fix the wire in place at any uneven spots. The wire has to lay absolutely flat on the ground everywhere so that the mower doesn't damage anything when driving over it. Speaking of driving over things, you can define how far the mowing robot can drive over the boundary wire using the menu item Crossing Distance in the settings. We'll talk about that more in another episode. You can also bury the wire underground. That way the grass will grow quickly to cover it. Also, fence off individual obstacles. When laying the wire around the obstacle, don't pound the hook quite all the way down. You can use the same hook to fix the wire on the way back. Oh yes, when coming around the obstacle, always start with the side that the wire comes from. That is important so that the wire doesn't cross over itself. That must never happen, since it may cause faults later. Use the same hook on the way back. The beginning and end of the circle should be as close to one another as possible. The signals of the wire then cancel each other out so that the mower can drive across the wire at this point. The mower can recognise a lot of things without fencing. If it runs into an obstacle, it just turns. And, like I said, be sure not to forget one thing in the spot where you've planned to connect the boundary wire to the guide wire. Lay a 10 centimetre loop. Once you've made it back to the charging station, leave about 50 centimetres of wire to connect it. Now that we've talked about the boundary wire in our last episode, it's time for the guide wire. Because by its nature, the Celino Minimo mows randomly, it is also possible to define additional mowing areas along the guide wire. That way, it's possible to guide the mower to remote parts of the garden or through narrow passages so that all of the areas can be mowed the way you want them to be. The guide wire also shows the mower the way back to the charging station when the timer gives it the command to do so or the battery is getting low. For inclines, it is important to lay the wire diagonally. That way the mower can get up the hill without any problems. If the robot is supposed to mow or traverse a narrow corridor that it would otherwise rarely find on its own, the guide wire helps it get in. But let's start from the beginning. First, clip the guide wire into the channel provided. Run it straight forward at least 1 metre in front of the floor plate. Then, use the hooks to lay it to the point on the boundary wire where the connection is planned. When doing so, ensure that there is much space as possible on the left side of the wire, facing the charging station. If possible, 135 centimetres or more. When the mowing robot runs along the guide wire, it is never directly on top of the wire, but rather parallel to it at varying intervals to prevent creating tracks. On the other side of the guide wire, a distance of at least 20 centimetres from the boundary cable must be maintained. This is especially important in narrow spaces, for example, in a tight driveway. If the robot is to regularly mow a narrow corridor, the start of the corridor must be defined as mowing area. Then activate Corridor Cut. The mowing robot then automatically switches to a zigzag pattern to ensure that it's up to the challenge. Even if the corridor is a dead end, the Minimo will mow it reliably using this function when driving in and out. Now we've laid the guide wire to the connection point. Here, cut the guide wire and separate the boundary wire at the loop. Then take the 3 ends and insert them into one of the holes in the white and blue connector until they stop and press them together. It is important to press the connector together hard. Otherwise, it's possible that no connection is made. Then the charging station will blink. By the way, the connector is filled with grease so that it's weatherproof. In the 5th episode, we've already laid the boundary and guide wires, and now we will connect the standing station. It's really simple. First, turn off the mower if it's still on, and take it out of the station. Remove the charging unit from the station. To connect, hold the 50cm of wire we left before as wiggle room, and hold it against the contacts with a loose loop, and cut off the excess. Then attach a clamp to each end and press them together tightly. Then attach the left boundary wire on the left side, the guide wire in the middle, and the right boundary wire on the right. Push in the ends of the wires really well until you feel a real jolt, and press all of the clamps together really tightly, otherwise there won't be a connection. Now clip the charging unit back in and check whether the LED of the charging station is lit up green. If it is flashing, check the manual for advice. Finally, reposition the station correctly and screw it firmly to the ground. Now push the mower back into the station and turn on the main switch. The mower has a predefined pin code. Top, right, bottom, left. The pin code can be changed in the app later. The bottom left and right LEDs now start flashing to show that the mower is ready. Now it is best to press the home button and confirm that the mow will stay in its little house while we work with the settings. To do this, it must be connected with the Gardena Bluetooth app within 3 minutes of being turned on. To do this, open the app, search for the available devices, and connect the app to the Minimo. In this episode, we'll show you how to use the Gardena Bluetooth app from the comfort of your smartphone. The Minimo has arrived in the 21st century. It couldn't be easier to start it up. Place the Minimo in the charging station, grab your smartphone, install the Gardena Bluetooth app, turn it on, and connect with the Solino Minimo via Bluetooth, all from the terrace. As soon as the app is open, you will see all of your connected Gardena products on the home screen of the app in one overview. Select the Minimo, and already you're joined at the hip. Using the app, you can see not only the battery status, or when the mowing robot will take its next turn around the garden, you also have all sorts of settings options. It's really easy, and right in your pocket. Just press start, and just like that, you can send your little helper on its way. Use Park to tell your Minimo to take a longer break if you want your garden for yourself. Either until the next scheduled round or until you reactivate it. Or tell it to cut specific areas that could use another passing using Spot Cut. With this button, you can use Gardena Assistant to enter your individual requests and calculate a mowing plan. Or set up a custom schedule for the week. In the settings, you can find more options for fine-tuning your intelligent mowing robot. There you can give your treasure a name. Define whether the little guy should follow the guide wire away instead of starting to mow directly in front of the charging station in order to reach more distant parts of the garden, or to achieve better results in narrow corridors. That is possible at up to 3 points along the guide wire. Just enter the distance in meters and the priorities in percentages, and the Minimo will set off to mow exactly where it makes sense. For example, in narrow corridors. In that case, just set a point at the start of the corridor and activate the option Corridor Cut. For all other cases, You can also define how far the mower should drive out of the charging station before it starts mowing. This is especially important if the station is in a corner. The starting point should be selected such that there is as much space as possible to the left of the guide wire when facing the charging station. You can also define how far crossing distance to tell your Minimo how far it is allowed to drive over the boundary wire. Allow the robot to use sensors to decide for itself whether mowing is even necessary. Define individual rules for mowing behaviour near the charging station. And finally, change the pin for your Minimo to protect it from theft. The only thing you have to set on the Minimo itself the old-fashioned way is the cutting height. To do this, turn off the mowing robot and turn it over onto its back. Loosen the screws from the blade place. Adjust it to the desired cutting height and tighten the screws again. 3 for the highest setting, 1 for the lowest. Super easy. Before I let the robot mow for the first time, I'll clear away anything that could get in the way. For example, a garden hose, gardening tools, children's toys, balls, and other items. By default, the cutting height is set at 3, so that the mower doesn't damage the wire before the grass has grown up over it. After a few days, you can lower the cutting height. In the Start menu, select whether it should start immediately or at the next scheduled time. And off it goes. Now check whether the mower finds its way back to the station. To do this, press the Stop button. Enter the pin on the device and position it about 3 meters from the guide wire facing towards the guide wire. Then use your smartphone to send it how and see what happens. The mower follows the guide wire to the station. Yay, it works! Even so, keep an eye on the mower at first and adjust the cable if necessary. The little guy is still new here. As a practical accessory, there is also a garage. I got one for myself at the same time. It is installed over the charging station to protect against rain, sun, leaves and dirt. The mower is still weatherproof, which makes cleaning very easy. Just spray off the mower on all sides. It can take it. And as opposed to other mowers, it doesn't need a rain sensor but can work in any weather. There are also all sorts of other practical accessories available from Gardena.